You see the innocence? Poor little girl, you didn't know what you were getting into, did you?
Jamaica is an unequal society on 3 dimensions: race, gender, and class. Even though slavery was abolished in 1838 and Jamaica got its independence in 1962, unacceptable levels of economic and social inequality remain, especially for working class blacks. We remain mentally colonized. Against this background, a black working class girl, Beverley Anderson, is born in 1941. Beverley's story is Jamaica's story. She has grand visions and fierce ambition, and she commits to building a meaningful life by transforming the lives of ordinary black people, especially women and children. Armed with the ideology of democratic socialism, she and her comrades, Michael Manley and D.K. Duncan, envision uniting the nation under a mantra of social and economic justice. For all the sound and fury of the righteous 70s, 50 years later, Jamaica has veered way off course. Beverley's dreams and ambitions were thwarted. We appear no more in control of our own destiny than we were before independence. As the sun sets on all she has done, she reflects on whether or not it was worth it. Is Jamaica really any closer to being a place that ordinary black people can live and thrive? Can we all learn by peeling away the mask of history and determining the best way forward? Give us vision, lest we perish.
My mother, I would say, came from a middle class, and my father came from more like the working class. He was like black, and my mother was what we call in Jamaica high brown. Her parents were very upset when she married my father. Her parents didn't come to the wedding. They were so upset. You had these two not real social classes to the extent that they were wide apart, but like one would be at the bottom of the middle class or the working class, and one would be nearer to the top. Both parents had a very high sense of knowledge around education. They knew that we had to be educated, and as girls, it had to be even more so.
The opportunity for a broader range of Jamaicans to attend high school opened up in 1958. Norman Manley introduced scholarships which allowed more black people into high schools. Beverley benefits from these changes. She went to St. Hugh's, which was a predominantly white and brown school.
St. Hugh's, it's still difficult for me. The first scholarship girls would have consisted of like my older sister. But by the time I came right after, you still were very aware that the school was becoming a school of diversity, because it didn't just have high browns in the school or white students. Under the Norman Manley regime, more black students would come in. And when I look back at it, the culture was so different. It was like bringing in two cultures. You have a culture and you bring in another culture. One of the ways my mother, after all of us were in high school, one of the ways she made it possible is that she was an excellent cook, and she made coconut. When I talk about it right now, I get moist-eyed. She made coconut cakes. You know, the white coconut cakes with the pink on top? And you couldn't go back home if you hadn't sold all of that. St. Jude's was not a place you go and sell. But she never get that. She said she don't business. That's what she have to do so you could get lunch money. So it's later in life that some of the girls who went to St. Jude's said, but we used to love them. But at the time, you know, we're just almost shy and ashamed. I would say of the 4 children, I was the one who talked back. It was automatic with me. I would get blamed for a lot of things because I always talk back. What you call feisty. So if Mama said, I said, And that went on throughout our lives. My relationship with my mother, certainly growing up, was more negative than positive. And she also had a temper, which is something else that upset me, because the temper could mean that she's going to pick up something and throw it. We're sitting at the table, like I was at one end of the table. We would have we used to have a nice dessert. We asked her why we couldn't have the potato pudding. She didn't answer me. And the second time I asked her, she just got very upset. She had a knife in her hand, and she just took it up and threw it across the thing and said, "I told you to stop." Asking me that question. And she not only took the knife and threw it across at me. I had it. I don't have it anymore because I did that. I had it for a while because I had to take it out. But I think my burning ambition at the time would be just to get out of the house. That's what I was focused on. How soon can I leave this house, which for me became very oppressive. Unfortunately for me, I was able to talk to her before she died and ask her to forgive me for how I was with her. And she didn't know what I was talking about. She said, "How was I with you? What are you talking about? You're the darkest one in the family. You're a woman, and I wanted you to make it. I had to be tougher on you." I think it was helpful because I learned how to be courageous in face of any issue. You know, I was the one, I think, who was able to speak out more than the others, mainly because I was thrust into certain situations where it was possible. It helped too in my relationship with men when I was able to have boyfriends and later on to get married, you know, that I didn't have to be a victim. It helped. I wouldn't have seen it that way at the time, I can tell you, but it helped.
Beverley envisions herself as a proud Black woman. She wants to make clear that she will be somebody against all odds.
There were exciting days in radio, television, modeling, and theater. My flatmate, Audrey Chong, taught me how to entertain, and so we socialized in our charming apartment at least once weekly, extending invitations to women and men in our world. It was not unusual for me to complete a television show, proceed to a modeling assignment on a cruise liner, and then appear in a theatrical production the following night. It was one of the most exciting times of my life.
My way over.
How do you do?
What are you doing there?
I'm looking for work, Mom.
I don't have any work to give you.
I can wash your car, you know, Mom.
My husband gets the car washed downtown.
I could do the gardening, you know, Mom.
Look, we have a gardening service to do that.
I can do anything, you know, Mom. Anything.
Look, there's nothing you can do for me. Nothing you can do for me.
They give you 10 cents, then, Mom.
What's the matter with you young, healthy boys? All you know to do is beg, beg, beg. That's all you can do, just beg? How you got in here anyway?
The gate was open, Mom.
Well, when you go outside, you make sure you lock the gate behind you. Who left the gate open?
It's time for The World Today. And in The World Today, we thought we'd take a look at robotics. Would you believe that, robotics? And what this looks like for, say, the year 2030. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today in Jamaica.
On the other side of the tracks, there is an elite Jamaican family with an immense political and artistic legacy. Michael Manley is a son of Norman Manley, the first Premier of Jamaica, and Edna Manley, the woman who celebrated Black beauty through her art. Michael is destined for a successful career in politics the moment he is ready to take up the baton. He has a strong favor with the working class through his history with the trade union movement. He became the leader of the PNP when his father Norman retired in 1969.
By the time he met me, I was already a name known in Jamaica, Beverley Anderson. I was producing his union talk. He used to do a union talk often, maybe even once a week, once every 2 weeks, talking to the workers. And the person was to produce him on that Saturday was not available. Wycliffe Bennett was the general manager, said I had to do it. I didn't want to do it. I had no idea then that within months of my first encounter with Michael Manley, our lives would begin to intertwine. My only other opinion of Manley was that he sounded boring on radio. If I was a duty announcer when a taped broadcast came on from him, I would introduce it and promptly go to sleep. Manley sounded so dull, so old. I quickly taught him how to color his words so that they would jump off the page and how to vary his voice to keep listeners' attention. I explained how to introduce and end the broadcast effectively and how to keep his audience in mind, addressing them directly and understanding their points of view. What a difference! He was a natural. He fell in love with this new delivery and was like a child who had just made a discovery. Although I did not admit it at the time, his reaction intrigued me. Here was this man, a Manley, who had already distinguished himself in the trade union movement and on the country as a whole, and yet he was willing to humble himself and learn communication techniques from a young woman. The next day, one of his close associates called me about giving him private lessons.
Labourites, hear me! I have altered the balance of power in Jamaica in favor of the black and the poor, and I have no apologies to history. You walk with a pride today you never had before because of my work, and nothing will turn that back in Jamaican history. Nothing will turn it back. Nothing will turn it back.
Love is clean and love is pure. And love is a thing that no doctor can cure. And love is a thing we need for sure. And if you don't got it, we got the music called cure.
Well, I've told the story so many times. I was doing a play at UWI, Mona, and he came to pick me up after the play. I had met him before and he was trying, but I wasn't taking him on. And somebody said, Michael Manley's here, so where are you telling me? He said, he has come to pick you up. I said, oh. So I ended up going with him. And we talked from about 8 o'clock that night until about 6 o'clock the following morning. And that's how I knew that I was hooked. I've never been so excited and just hearing some words I never heard before. Oh, it was amazing. And he followed it up well, never stopped until I gave in to a date with him. And after a while, we were just doing something every night and just enjoying each other. But we just couldn't stop. We just couldn't stop seeing each other. You have been in love. I mean, it's like, like something. And then the politics came into it, and that was it for me. All the dreams he had, which we shared, some of which I didn't even know I shared. Traveling overseas. I mean, it was like the two of us had become one.
Beverley and Michael developed a symbiotic relationship that was political, intellectual, and sexual. The potential scandal of an interracial and interclass relationship forces Beverley and Michael to get engaged in secret. Although Michael is technically black, he's perceived by most Jamaicans as white. Upon hearing the rumors, the Jamaican newspapers quote an announcement from the London Express to announce the engagement as there is no official local source. The dawning of one of Jamaica's most powerful political couples in history begins in the shadows. Who she? Where Michael go find this hurry come up?
What's her last name? Who is her father?
Why Michael choose a she?
I was cast into another world of sit-down dinners and three-course meals and eating stuff that I'd never eaten before. I mean, it may sound ridiculous, but something...
Using instruments that you
using, as I say in the book, those escargot instruments, you know.
Yes.
But what was wonderful throughout it all is that I had his full support. Couldn't have done it if he was not the kind of individual who made me feel loved, protected, and supported wherever we went together.
Almost every night the Manleys listen to classical music now. Like Edna would come over and and you can't say a word in it. He was like an 18th century lover. Whoever the woman at the time was, he cherished her, he worshipped her. And I mean worship. Worship to the extent that sometimes I couldn't manage it. It could become stifling because, I give you an example, we'd be sitting at breakfast and I say, sweetheart, I have a headache. And the next thing you know, 5 doctors arrive. And I'm not exaggerating. Just in case one doctor couldn't handle it, Beverley has a headache. One morning I said, I need a break. I would really love to go to Europe for even a day. Next thing you know, travel agent was there. Your husband said, you want to go to Europe, where do you want to go? It was kind of, you know, and a real romantic. That's how he was, very, well with me anyway, very gentle and kind. I thought when I met him, because he was 17, almost 18 years older than me, and one of the reasons I risked, and I put it that way, the marriage, is that I thought that he had finished with all that stuff. Because when I met him, I knew he was a playboy, right? You can't look like that. It's hard to look like that and not be a playboy. He was so good looking. He did have a circle of wives who took care of him and who he took care of. And they were mostly little white women. Every time I see a little white woman now, I think, if Michael was around, she'd be after him. So in a way that helped with the jealousy, because I never saw myself as them. What he did was very clever. He kept me so satisfied and cherished that, you know. And then he met them in the afternoons. Because he was a very disciplined man. He'd come like at 6 o'clock, we sit down and have dinner. But they were like some little white people. And none of them could say anything about me either. There was one woman in particular who later on I realized liked him. And she was having a dinner party and said, when she invited him, because he told me, she said to him, you can't bring her. And he said, who are you talking about? So I'm talking about Beverley, can't bring her. He says, well, if I can't bring her, I'm not coming. That was it. So he didn't go.
Michael Manley became Prime Minister in 1972 with a landslide victory. He promises fundamental changes for post-colonial Jamaica that will uplift the destiny of the ordinary Jamaican. He pitched hopes of self-reliance. He woos the nation with his democratic socialist ideals. The brown elite fear this socialist-leaning transformation will take their privileges away. Many migrate. Michael reacts with callous indifference to their departure.
Daddy is very known for having said, if you don't like what I'm doing, there are 5 flights a day. You can go to Miami. Now, Daddy didn't literally mean to chase the middle classes out of Jamaica, but he was tired of everybody accusing him of being communist, and this. It just irritated him because he had an idea of what he was trying to do, and he knew it wasn't communist, and he was just sick of the press and everybody getting at him, and he was just coming back from Cuba. I remember Beverley looked at him and said, "What have you done? What have you done?" And he's like, well, "What have I done?"
Many business owners and skilled laborers leave. The brain drain speeds up.
I find a lot of empty houses in Beverly Hills because most of the people move to foreign.
Next time on Beverley Manley Uncensored, Beverley uses her position to raise working class consciousness. She is heavily criticized by several members of the public and the political community. After all, she defies the traditional expectation of a prime minister's wife to cut ribbons and kiss babies. Don't miss the next gripping episode of Beverley Manley Uncensored.
There was no shortage of men who wanted to date me. And it was fun. But my mother's thing was in my ears. You know, you can kiss, you can do anything else, fondle, anything, no sex. That stayed with me until I got into the women's thing and opened up.